Hey, welcome back for another Trick Tip Tuesday, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit more in depth on TIG welding sheet metal. We did a video not that long ago on some of the basics of TIG welding sheet metal and some of the steps that I use, to get going on a sheet metal project when you're going to be welding panels together. Wanted to talk a little bit more about, I guess, some of the things that you should focus on or not focus on when you're TIGging sheet metal, maybe what rod choice to use, filler rod, and then explain maybe the tungsten size I use and why, and then also some of the practices while I'm actually welding. So first off, as far as the TIG stuff goes, I pretty much use a 3/32 tungsten inside my torch, and I use that on about everything. I typically don't weld anything super thick. If I'm going something super thick that requires a lot of amperage, number one, this machine only goes up to 210. So you can do some thicker stuff, but nothing too crazy. And for the little bit of that stuff that I do, the 3/32 works well for it. And then I also weld sheet metal with it as well. So that's a universal tungsten size for me. Might depend on what you're doing, but I like welding sheet metal with 3/32. It's been a practice I've been using for quite a while, and I haven't found a reason to want to change. So from there, as far as filler rod size, obviously you got to pick a size that's going to be matched to your material, the heat you're going to be welding, that sort of thing. Right here I have an example of a 1/8 inch. This is 3/32 filler rod, 1/16 filler rod, and 0.45 filler rod. And we'll put a picture up on the screen to show you guys kind of the visual difference between the sizes of those three. And I've used 16th rod on sheet metal stuff, but usually if I'm doing like 16 gauge sheet metal, something like that. This material here is 18 gauge, so I like to use an 0.45 rod on it, or even an 0.35 rod on it. This is all ER70 S2 rod. Like I said, I will go down to an 0.35 depending on the project and what I need. But you can buy all those different sizes, and I do like to have them on hand because you never know, based on what you're working on, what size you're going to want. So these I use an 0.45. And just like anything else, if it may be a little bit thick for what some guys like or whatever, some of it's all just going to be dependent on how fast you're moving and the amount of heat you're using in your parts. So for starters, on the machine settings, I've got the machine set at 60 amps, and this is 16 gauge. I do have it this is 18 gauge set at 60 amps. Part of the reason I have it at 60 is that this piece is sitting on the hammer form, so it's a steel hammer form sitting underneath of here. So you have that steel block, that thick steel block that is taking some of the heat out of the weld. So I have to turn the machine up just a little bit more to be able to get it to melt the sheet metal and get my puddle flowing the way I want it to. So if I was welding this, say, off of this hammer form to where it was just open air behind the 18 gauge sheet metal, I probably would be dropping the machine down to maybe 45 amps or something like that. Kind of depends, but sometimes I like to set it a little bit high just to give myself the ability to pedal it a little harder to give myself a little more heat if I feel like I want it. So from there, when you're actually welding, I've gotten the question before of, when I get done welding some sheet metal, they're like, well, sometimes that doesn't look very good. That doesn't look like a good TIG weld. Well, when you're welding sheet metal and the whole purpose is to grind the weld off and hammer it smooth and metal finish it out to where it all looks like it's one piece, it doesn't matter what your weld looks like. Obviously, you want to make sure it's a quality weld, so you don't want pinholes in it. You don't want that stuff. You want to make sure your metal's clean. But as far as, your sheet metal looking like you just stacked a bunch of dimes on it, it's pretty pointless in my opinion. And I could do that if I wanted to slow way down, use less heat maybe, and really control the weld to where it looked like I was just stacking dimes all the way around my part. but then I'm going to grind it all off and it doesn't matter anyway. So when you look up close, the weld just kind of looks like it was done really quick and mainly just to get the job done, and that's exactly what it is. So on this part, there is this whole area around here where this weld seam is about 54 to 55 inches of weld. And really this will only take me a couple minutes to do. So, you know, if I was really trying to make it look good, you know, I would have to slow down. It would take a lot longer. Whereas because I'm grinding it off, I'm just trying to get the weld done so I can get to the metal finishing aspect, and then from there, you know, get the part completed. So visual aspect of the TIG weld does not matter as much, as long as it's still welded properly and you're adding the right amount of filler rod, using the right amount of heat to get penetration, that sort of thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and sit down and weld, and I'll kind of talk through a little bit of what I'm doing. Now this piece is tacked together. The sides here are tacked together about every inch, and then I went about every half inch as I was hammering around these corners to get that all laid out. But yeah, they're tacked together and then just tapped lightly with a hammer around there to make sure that the two surfaces on either side are smooth and flat and flush with each other. So like I said before, I use an 0.45 Tig Rod, and basically when I get started here, I just like to make sure that where I'm set up, where my work is set up, whether I'm on a car or on a table, all that sort of thing, I like to make sure that I'm at a comfortable height to where my arms are comfortable. You know, everything in that realm is going to make it, when you're comfortable, it's easier to weld, it's easier to get the end product looking the way you want it to. So yeah, so I'm basically going to start over here, and my piece rotates here on this versa mount. So I'm going to weld, and I'm just going to be going as long as I can. And the only reason I'm going to stop is just to readjust myself a little bit and then keep going. And then we'll just keep spinning this around, get around to the whole piece, and we'll get this welded in a matter of a couple minutes here and show you guys the end product. So as I start welding here, I'm basically just, once I get my puddle, I just start moving, and in a sense where I'm adding the rod when necessary, making sure that I'm getting proper penetration and moving fast enough too to where I'm not overdoing the amount of heat in the part, and that I'm just keeping that nice consistent flow. So I'm stopping here strictly so I can move. So I'm going to kind of adjust myself a little bit here, and that was probably about a 8-inch long, 7 to 8 inch long weld. So I'm going to move, find another comfortable spot again. Comfort is a big thing when you're doing this kind of welding, especially on a fine part like sheet metal where you're really trying to control the heat. You need to make sure you can focus properly on what you're doing. So when you're comfortable, it makes it a lot easier to focus. If you're uncomfortable and you're thinking about your position, thinking about how uncomfortable your arm is or your legs falling asleep, that sort of thing, makes it a lot harder to focus on the weld that you're laying down. So like I said, I'm not going at all for looks on this. It's strictly just to get the weld done so I can move on. So I just welded that whole side in 2 passes. Stopped once to move, now I'm going to move again. Rotate around. I'll have a few more stops around these corners just because of the positioning of them. So like I said in the previous trick tip video, when you go to weld sheet metal, you know, some people tell you should bounce around, weld little tiny spots, you know, here and there, bounce around the material to keep the heat out of it, all that sort of thing. And then like I explained before about why I do continuous welds, and that was mainly to make any warpage in the part more consistent, keep your heat consistent, and I always find that your part and your panel stays straighter with less warpage. We got around that corner, and buzz down the side here. So you can see in just that short amount of time, we welded 55 inches about worth of sheet metal here. And now at this point, it's gonna be ready to metal finish out and get this part being finished. So thanks for watching this week's trick tip. Hopefully this gives you guys some ideas on tigging sheet metal and some more of the process on it and what it takes and things to focus on or things to practice in your own shop. So thanks for watching this week's trick tip. Email us tips@Trick-Tools.com. We'll include your ideas in our next videos, and thanks for watching.